Let me tell you about this crazy first date I had a while back. I was pretty excited when this guy, Jake, asked me to go hiking. Hitting outdoors together seemed like a fun idea for a first date. I'm into hiking, so I figured exploring nature would be romantic. We met up Saturday morning and headed to the trailhead. Jake had this big backpack with water and stuff. He said he knew about an overlook with killer views of the trail and thought I'd love it. I was like, yeah, let's do it. Wasn't thinking about how far away from everything we end up. So we start hiking, just chatting about normal stuff. Jake's asking me questions and seeming real interested in getting to know me. And I'm telling him things I don't usually talk about on a first date. Felt comfortable opening up for some reason. Gotta say, it was a gorgeous day. Sunny skies, perfect temperature, wildflowers all over, and birds chirping. Felt like we were really having this idyllic outdoor date. I was getting pretty pumped imagining us reaching this scenic viewpoint together. After maybe an hour, we get to this rocky ridge with insane 360-degree views. We stop to check it out and take some pics. I tell Jake how beautiful it is up here. And he's like, yeah, I discovered the spot and we dig it. Not gonna lie, I was into it at this point. Seems sweet you wanted to share this cool place with me. We chill for a bit, have a snack. Then Jake says he knows an even better view if we keep going up the ridge. Points out this sketchy little trail heading up. I hesitation for a sec, cause it looks steep and pretty narrow. But Jake seems confident, so I'm like, okay, let's check it out. As we're hiking more, the trail gets steeper and narrower. Gotta focus on where I'm stepping and not slipping. Conversation dies down cause we're just trying not to fall at this point. I keep waiting for the vista Jake talked about, but the trail just keeps twisting through the trees. After another hour, I'm definitely feeling weird about how far we are. Haven't seen a single person in a while. I know it'll get dark earlier in these woods too. So when I see a little break in the trees with a view, I suggest turning around to get back before nightfall. But Jake pressures me to keep going, saying the overlook is just up ahead. He's being kind of pushy, insisting it'll be worth it. I don't know why I listened, but I was like, fine, let's keep going. Stupid, I know. The sun's going down, and we just keep trudging uphill. Eventually, the trail levels out at the top of the ridge. We climb up some rocks surrounded by scraggly trees. I look around expecting some amazing view, but it's just more trees everywhere. So I ask Jake where this view is he talked up so much. And he just smiles weird and says it's right ahead. We gotta keep going to reach the perfect spot. That's when I realize he totally lied to get me out here. We're in the middle of nowhere with no clear way back down. I'm freaking out realizing how vulnerable I am alone with this stranger. When I say we should head back before it's too late, Jake blocks the path and says we can't leave without finding the view. Won't let me turn around. I'm desperate now, suggesting we come back another time to look more. But he shakes his head, saying the view is close and will regret bailing. My mind's racing trying to figure out what to do. Can I get away from him? Will anyone come look for me if I don't make it home? Jake keeps ushering me onward, acting super sketchy now. Looking around all paranoid, but also weirdly determined. I realize I gotta just keep moving and wait for a chance to get away. It's getting dark and I'm totally relying on this creep who won't let me leave. We keep going and Jake gets more freaked out, muttering under his breath and scanning the woods intensely like he's looking for something specific, but also thinks we're being followed. I'm wondering if he's on drugs, which would explain why he's acting so nuts. When it's almost completely dark, we come to this little rundown cabin in a clearing. Jake gets all excited and wants to pull me inside. I refuse, planting my feet and demanding he tell me what this is about or I'm fighting my own way back. Jake gets super pissed and grabs my arm hard, rambling about insane stuff we supposedly need to do in the cabin. I'm horrified realizing his sick implications. I wrench away and just bolt blindly into the pitch black woods. Jake crashes after me making these whacked up threats if I don't come back. I'm sprinting with no idea where I'm going, branches whipping my face. I just gotta get away from him. Jake's still coming, yelling crazier stuff as he falls behind. But I can't stop, pure survival instinct kicking in now. His behavior at the cabin makes it clear he planned to do terrible things to me out here. I run till I can barely stand, still lost in the woods. I'm terrified, but also losing hope I'll get away. Then I stumble out onto an empty road and see lights from a town in the distance. I've never felt so relieved. I flag down the first car. The driver looks shocked when I fall into his passenger seat, all scratched up, clothes torn, exhausted. I try to explain what happened as we speed towards safety, away from Jake and whatever twisted plan he had for me in those isolated woods. I was so stupid for trusting Jake and ignoring all the red flags. I'm lucky to be alive and not join the list of girls who have disappeared hiking with strange men. It's a chilling lesson. The wilderness isn't all rainbows and butterflies like I thought. There are dangers out there for anyone who lets their guard down. I don't think I'll ever forget that dreadful night. I had met him online, and after a few weeks of messaging back and forth, we decided to meet up for dinner. He seemed nice enough in our conversations, friendly, smart, kind. I was optimistic it would go well as I got ready, carefully picking out my outfit and styling my hair. When I arrived at the restaurant, he was already seated at a table. I recognized him instantly from his photos. He smiled and stood to greet me. So far, so good. We ordered drinks and an appetizer while making small talk. He seemed a little quieter in person than online, but I figured he was just nervous since it was our first time meeting. Things started to take a turn after we ordered our entrees. A large group of rowdy people entered the restaurant and sat at the table next to us. There must have been 10 or 12 of them, all loud and already visibly drunk. I felt uncomfortable with their proximity, but tried to ignore them and continue my conversation with my date. Suddenly, one of the men from the group came over to our table and started making lewd comments toward me, slurring his words. My date just sat there silently, eyes down, while the man called me vulgar names. I asked my date under my breath if we could move tables to get away from this man, but he refused, shaking his head. The harassment from the drunk group continued and escalated. Two other men came over and stood uncomfortably close to me, blocking me into the booth. My date still did nothing. He wouldn't even make eye contact with me. I started to feel panicked being surrounded by these aggressive strangers while my date sat there passively. I repeatedly asked my date to intervene or call for help, but he shrugged as if he didn't want to get involved. At that point, I had to take matters into my own hands. I forcibly yanked my arm away from one of the men, leaving scratches from where he had grabbed my wrist. I loudly told them to leave me alone. I squeezed my way out of the booth and went to tell a staff member what was happening. Thankfully, some staff and patrons helped escort the unruly group out of the restaurant. I was left stunned, shaking, and holding back tears. My date had simply watched everything go down without any regard for my safety or well-being. Needless to say, I immediately left the restaurant and got myself home, locking the door securely behind me. I keep replaying the terrifying experience in my mind. I never expected a casual first date to go so horribly wrong. It pains me that someone I thought might be a promising romantic connection didn't lift a finger while I was in distress. I'm having trouble trusting again after that traumatic night. Every small noise makes me jump now. I'm constantly looking over my shoulder when I'm out in public, half expecting those men to reappear. My friends keep apologizing that I had to go through such an ordeal. I appreciate their support, but no one could have predicted things would go so wrong. At least now I know to be more cautious when meeting someone for the first time. I need to make sure it's in a very public place and that the person genuinely cares about me before I open up and make myself vulnerable again. It may take a while before I'm ready to put myself out there after that disaster of a first date. For now, I'm just taking things one day at a time and focusing on feeling safe again. What happened wasn't my fault, but I still have lingering feelings of guilt. I'm working on being kinder to myself as I process it all. That evening certainly taught me a lot about personal safety and the importance of trusting your instincts. I'm relieved I escaped relatively unharmed, as frightening as it was. I know better what to watch for now if I ever try meeting someone new again down the road. I hope none of my friends have to endure a first date horror story like mine. In the weeks after, I found myself being much more vigilant about my safety. I stopped taking evening walks in my neighborhood alone. I held my keys in my hand like a weapon when I walked to my car at night after work. I no longer accepted drinks from men at bars or parties unless I watched the bartender pour it. It was exhausting, but felt necessary. Several months later, I finally started to feel comfortable going out in public alone again. The initial fear and anxiety had subsided, though I was still more cautious than before. I re-downloaded the dating apps, but was meticulous about vetting people first. I suggested only meeting for a quick coffee rather than a full dinner. Baby steps. The experience definitely left its mark on me emotionally. I became withdrawn in social settings and had trouble connecting with new romantic prospects. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for them to reveal themselves as someone aggressive and dangerous. My friends often had to reassure me that not every man was like my nightmare first date. After nearly a year, I finally felt ready to try dating again. I was seeing a therapist who helped me work through my lingering trauma. She encouraged me to take things slowly and reminded me that I was strong for surviving such an ordeal. I regained some confidence in my ability to judge character and stand up for myself if needed. For my first date back in the scene, I chose to meet for coffee rather than a full meal. I made sure we were meeting at a cafe I knew well, with plenty of people around. Thankfully, he was perfectly kind and respectful during our date. I still felt some nervousness and had to fight the urge to constantly scan for threats, but overall it went smoothly. It was a step forward in healing. Now, over a year later, I can look back on that horrific first date as a learning experience rather than a source of constant fear. I trust myself and my instincts more. I surround myself with good people who support me. While I'm still more cautious, I no longer view the world as inherently dangerous. Healing is a long process, but I'm proud of how far I've come. What happened wasn't my fault, and I refuse to let it define my life. I'm so much more than one bad night, and the future brings so many better first dates. I was so excited when my coworker Reggie asked me out on a date. We had been flirting around the office for weeks and really hit it off. I thought he was very attractive, and we seemed to have a lot in common, so I readily agreed when he suggested coming over to his place for dinner. I envisioned a romantic night for just the two of us to get to know each other better outside of work. When I arrived at his house, I was surprised to see several cars in the driveway. As soon as I walked in the front door, I was shocked to find his entire family there in the living room. Parents, siblings, aunts, uncles, and cousins. At least 15 people total. Reggie cheerfully introduced me to everyone and told me he wanted me to meet his family since I was so special to him. I was completely blindsided. This was supposed to be an intimate first date, just the two of us. As I stood there speechless, his family members started bickering loudly right in front of me. His mom and aunt were arguing over what to serve for dinner. His dad and uncle were debating politics and getting really heated. His siblings were running around the house yelling. It was total chaos. I wanted desperately to sneak out the front door, but every time I inched toward it, someone would usher me back into the living room or offer me a drink. Reggie acted like everything was completely normal and kept trying to introduce me to more family members. I plastered a smile on my face but felt incredibly awkward and uncomfortable. We finally sat down for dinner, all 18 of us crammed around the table. The arguments continued, with people talking over each other and cutting each other off mid-sentence. At one point, food went flying through the air as Reggie's dad pounded his fist on the table to make a point. No one seemed embarrassed about their behavior in front of a guest. Throughout the excruciating meal, I kept trying to catch Reggie's eye to signal that I wanted to leave, but he was engrossed in conversation with his family members and didn't notice my cues. Each time I said I should probably get going, someone would loudly declare that the night was still young and I simply must stay for another drink. After dinner, they all gravitated to the living room again. Different family factions broke off into smaller arguments. The volume in the room kept escalating. I was developing a massive headache from all the chaos. I pulled Reggie aside and told him politely but firmly that I was exhausted and needed to head home. He got a panicked look in his eyes and begged me not to leave yet. But I had reached my breaking point. I quickly thanked him for dinner, waved goodbye to his bickering family, and rushed out the door before anyone could stop me. I was in total shock as I drove home. The night was nothing like I expected for a first date. I thought it would be romantic and help us grow closer, but instead I got a front row seat to family dysfunction. I barely got to exchange 2 words with Reggie the entire evening. Needless to say, there was no second date. I avoided Reggie at the office after that horrible experience. He seemed like a nice guy when it was just the two of us, but clearly he came from a toxic family environment. I wanted no part of the chaos I saw that night ever again. It was definitely a first date that left me horrified and taught me to take things slowly when getting to know someone new. Always meet in a neutral public setting first. You just never know what you'll discover until you see someone in their own habitat. Looking back, I can see some red flags that I had overlooked in my excitement about Reggie. At work, he was always getting calls and texts from family members that seemed to irritate him. He complained about having to go to weekly family dinners and other obligations. I just thought he was a dedicated family man, but in reality, he was caught in the dysfunction. I should have suggested meeting for coffee or a drink for our first date, rather than going to his house. That way I could have scoped out the situation a bit before diving into meeting his entire family, but I let my attraction cloud my judgment. My friends tried to warn me to take it slowly with Reggie. They could see that I was really into him and thought I might be moving too fast, but I brushed off their concerns and convinced myself everything was great between us. After this disaster of a first date, I realized I should have listened to their advice. Looking back on it now, I can see so many moments when alarm bells should have gone off, like the time Reggie got exasperated when his mom called him for the third time during our lunch break at work, or the day his sister showed up unannounced and dragged him out of the office for some family emergency. Reggie always seemed overwhelmed and resentful when dealing with his family's demands. In my rush to get to know Reggie better, I was willing to overlook little things that hinted at much bigger issues under the surface. I learned to be more cautious moving forward when I feel a spark with someone new. It's so important to watch for red flags early on and not simply get swept up in the excitement. My friends said they weren't surprised at all when I told them the story of that disastrous first date dinner. In hindsight, the signs were there all along that Reggie came from a tumultuous family environment. If only I had been more realistic and less dazzled by my attraction to him at first. But sometimes you need to learn difficult relationship lessons through experience. It was supposed to be a simple first date, a chance to get to know someone new. Little did I know, it would quickly turn into a nightmare. The night started off innocently enough. We had matched on a dating app and decided to meet up for drinks at a local bar. I was nervous, as first dates always make me feel, but I tried to push past it and focus on having a good time. As we sat down at our table, my date, let's call him Adam, immediately began making small talk. He asked about my job, my hobbies, my family, all the standard first date questions. At first, I thought nothing of it, assuming he was just trying to get to know me better. But as the conversation progressed, I started to notice some unsettling details. Adam seemed to know things about me that I had never shared on my dating profile or even mentioned in passing. He knew the name of my cat, the fact that I had recently gone on a trip to Europe, and even the specific brand of coffee I like to drink in the mornings. I felt a growing sense of unease creep up my spine. How could he possibly know all of these personal details about me? I racked my brain, trying to remember if I had ever mentioned any of this to him before, but I came out empty. As the night wore on, Adam's obsession with me became increasingly clear. He would bring up obscure facts about my life, things I had never shared with him, and then act surprised when I looked confused. It was as if he had been following my every move, meticulously cataloging every aspect of my existence. I tried to steer the conversation in a more benign direction, hoping to somehow diffuse the situation. But no matter what I said, Adam always seemed to find a way to bring it back to me and my life. It was like he was testing me, seeing how much he could reveal before I caught on to his game. The more I listened, the more I realized that this date was no accident. Adam had clearly been planning this for a long time, meticulously gathering information about me and orchestrating this encounter. It was as if he had been obsessed with me for years, waiting for the perfect opportunity to insert himself into my life. As the night drew to a close, I found myself making excuses to leave, desperate to get away from this man and his unnerving fascination with me. Adam, however, seemed unwilling to let me go, insisting that we make plans to see each other again. I politely declined, citing a work commitment the following day. But as I walked away, I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread and a growing realization that this was far from over. Adam had clearly become fixated on me, and I had the unsettling feeling that he would not be easily deterred. In the days that followed, I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering if Adam was watching me, waiting for his next opportunity to insert himself back into my life. I changed my social media privacy settings, deleted my dating profiles, and even considered moving to a different city just to get away from this nightmare. But no matter what I did, I couldn't shake the feeling that Adam was always there, lurking in the shadows, obsessively following my every move. It was a constant source of anxiety and fear. I found myself constantly on edge, never knowing when or where he might show up again. As time passed, the fear slowly transformed into a sense of resignation. I had tried to outrun this situation, but it was clear that Adam was not going to let me go that easily. He had become a permanent fixture in my life, a dark shadow that followed me wherever I went. In the end, I realized that the only way to reclaim my life was to confront this obsession head on. I reached out to the authorities, sharing my story and pleading for their help. It was a difficult and emotional process, but I knew that I had to do something before Adam's fixation spiraled even further out of control. The investigation is still ongoing, and I can't help but feel a sense of uncertainty about what the future holds. But I'm determined to reclaim my life, to break free from this obsession that has held me captive for far too long. As I look back on that fateful first date, I can't help but wonder how things could have gone so wrong. It was supposed to be a simple, harmless encounter, a chance to meet someone new and potentially forge a connection. But instead, it became a living nightmare, a twisted game of cat and mouse that has left me forever changed. I know that the scars of this experience will likely never fully heal, but I'm determined to move forward, to rebuild my life and find a sense of normalcy once again. It won't be easy, but I'm a survivor, and I refuse to let this obsession consume me. So, if you ever find yourself on a first date, be wary of the red flags, the subtle clues that something might not be quite right. Trust your instincts and don't be afraid to walk away if something feels off, because you never know when a seemingly innocent encounter might turn into a nightmare that you can't escape. Looking back, I can see all the signs that Adam was obsessed with me from the very beginning. The way he seemed to know everything about me without me ever telling him, how he kept steering the conversation back to my personal life, no matter what I said, and how unwilling he was to let me leave at the end of the date. At the time, I tried to justify it or ignore the red flags. But in hindsight, it's clear that Adam had been stalking me for a long time before we ever met face to face. I keep replaying our conversation in my head, analyzing every word, every facial expression, searching for the exact moment when I should have realized something was wrong. Was it when he mentioned my cat's name, or when he brought up that trip I took years ago? At what point did this date cross the line from uncomfortable into dangerous? I'm not sure I'll ever pinpoint the exact instant when Adam's interest turned into obsession, but I do know that I'll never ignore those warning signs again. My friends and family don't understand why I can't just move on, why I'm still living in fear of Adam coming back. They tell me that with the restraining order in place, he can't legally come near me anymore, but they don't realize that the law means nothing to someone like Adam. People keep telling me that I need to stop looking over my shoulder, that I'm only empowering Adam by remaining a victim. And rationally, I know they're probably right. But it feels impossible to just turn off that panicked feeling, that constant worry that I'm being followed and watched. While I'm not ready to date again anytime soon, someday I hope to find a healthy relationship, one based on mutual trust, respect, and honesty. I was really nervous about this first date. I hadn't been on one in years and was worried I wouldn't know what to say or do. But when I met Kim at the cafe, she seemed just as nervous as I was, which actually made me feel a bit better. We both stumbled through some small talk at first, but eventually started to relax and the conversation flowed more easily. I was actually starting to have a good time when it happened. Kim suddenly went pale and clutched her stomach, doubling over in pain. "Oh God, I don't feel well," she moaned. I immediately jumped up to help her, but she recoiled from my touch. "Don't come near me. You did this, didn't you?" She accused, eyes wild with panic. I was stunned, not understanding what was happening. "What are you talking about? I didn't do anything. You just got sick." I tried to reassure her, but she was having none of it. She started raving about how I must have poisoned her food or drink, becoming more and more hysterical. I looked around the cafe, horrified, as other diners began to stare. I begged Kim to let me help, to call an ambulance, anything. But she refused, pushing me away and shouting I was trying to finish the job. I was panicking, not knowing what to do. This was spiraling out of control so quickly. Suddenly, Kim lurched to her feet, knocking over the table in the process. The sound of breaking dishes and scattering silverware only seemed to agitate her further. She stumbled towards the exit, still yelling about how I was trying to kill her. I hurried after her, trying to catch up without touching her, afraid of setting her off again. Once outside, Kim darted down the sidewalk, weaving unsteadily. I followed, calling out to her, pleading with her to stop and let me help. But she just kept going, sometimes glancing back at me with pure terror in her eyes. I had no idea what was wrong with her, but I knew I had to get her to safety before she hurt herself. Finally, she ducked into a narrow alley, and I rushed in after her, praying I could calm her down. But when I rounded the corner, she was nowhere to be seen. I spun around, heart pounding, searching frantically. Then I heard a noise behind me and whirled to find Kim crouched on the ground, trembling. "Get away from me!" she shrieked, scrambling backwards. I held up my hands, trying to show her I meant no harm, but she just kept retreating, eyes wild. I slowly started to back out of the alley, not wanting to provoke her further. As I reached the street, I turned to flag down a passerby, anyone who could help. But when I glanced back, Kim was gone. I rushed down the alley, calling her name, but there was no sign of her. Panic welled up inside me. What if she was hurt, or worse? I had to find her. I searched the surrounding area for what felt like hours, growing more and more desperate. I checked every alley and side street, but there was no trace of Kim. Eventually, I had to accept defeat and go to the police. It took my statement but didn't seem overly concerned. She's probably fine. Just had a bit of an episode, one officer said dismissively. That did little to ease my mind. I spent the next few days consumed by worry, replaying the horrific scene over and over. Or was Kim? Was she okay? Had something terrible happened to her? Then not knowing was agonizing. Then a week later, I got a call. It was the police informing me that Kim's body had been found in a dumpster a few blocks from the cafe. She had died from a drug overdose. The official cause of death was ruled as accidental, but the detective on the case had a theory. Apparently, Kim had a long history of mental illness and substance abuse issues that I knew nothing about. She had recently stopped taking her medication and had been spiraling out of control. The detective believes that the episode I witnessed was likely a manic episode brought on by her untreated condition. And in her paranoid state, she had fled, taken more drugs, and ultimately died alone. I was devastated. If only I had known, if only I had been able to get her help. The guilt was crushing. I keep replaying that horrible night, wondering if there was anything I could have done differently. But in the end, there was no way for me to have known what was really going on. I was just an unsuspecting victim caught up in the horrific unraveling of someone else's personal demons. It's been a year now, and the memory of that first date still haunts me. I'll never be able to fully get over the trauma of watching Kim's rapid descent into madness and her tragic, untimely death. It's a sobering reminder that we can never truly know what someone is struggling with underneath the surface. And that sometimes, no matter how much we want to help, there's nothing we can do to prevent the inevitable. The guilt and regret will stay with me forever, and I'll be playing every moment of that night over and over in my mind. If only I could go back and change things, get Kim the help she so desperately needed. But it's too late now. The nightmare is real and unchangeable. All I can do is try and move forward with the scars of that horrific first date. I still get chills when I think back to that ill-fated first date with Tasha. When we initially matched on a dating app, I thought I'd hit the jackpot. Her photos showed a gorgeous, elegant woman, and her profile portrayed her as a successful entrepreneur. Our pre-date text conversations were fun and flirty, so I eagerly looked forward to finally meeting her. We met at a nice restaurant downtown that Tasha had suggested. She looked just as beautiful in person as in her photos. Dressed impeccably, Tasha carried herself with a charming, confident air as we chatted over dinner. She was a gracious conversationalist, asking me thoughtful questions about my job, family, and interests. I found myself opening up to her, enjoying the rapport between us. After dinner, Tasha invited me back to her place for a drink. This luxury high-rise apartment reflected her purported success. She gave me a tour, eventually pouring us glasses of expensive wine. Settling close beside me on the couch, she began telling me of her lucrative entrepreneurial ventures and lavish lifestyle. That's when things took an uneasy turn. As we sipped our wine, Tasha shifted the conversation to me, asking about my finances and investment history. She said she was looking for business partners to help fund an exciting, highly profitable opportunity. This venture would make me rich beyond my wildest dreams if I invested now, Tasha claimed. I politely declined, explaining I wasn't comfortable lending money on a first date. Tasha seemed unfazed, continuing to tout the incredible potential returns if I joined her. The more I resisted, the more persistent she became. Her tone grew increasingly forceful as she pressed me to commit funds that very night. I stood up, saying I should head home. Tasha latched onto my arm, insisting I stay and reconsider. She didn't take my no seriously, cajoling and guilt-tripping me to try to manipulate me into handing over money. Her facade of charm slipped away, revealing a demanding, aggressive attitude. She refused to unlock the door, physically blocking my exit while making threats to coerce me into giving her cash. Spooked, I lied that I had left my wallet in my car and just needed to grab it quick. Tasha finally relented. The moment I got outside, I sprinted to my car and locked the doors. My heart pounded as I sped away, relieved to escape but rattled by this experienced scammer. In hindsight, I'm grateful I didn't fall for Tasha's manipulation and give her my hard-earned money. She turned out to be a deceptive, dangerous person hiding beneath an alluring veneer. I consider myself lucky to have escaped unscathed. Now I'm much more cautious about whom I agree to meet, ensuring to properly vet anyone before a first date. My scary experience was an important lesson about trusting strangers too quickly. Though Tasha appeared successful and charming at first, looks can be deceiving. From now on, I'll listen to my instincts to avoid finding myself in such a perilous position again. I decided to take a break from dating after that traumatic first date. When friends encouraged me to get back out there, I was hesitant, worried about encountering another manipulative scammer. But Donna, a vivacious redhead I met through a coworker, persuaded me to give it one more try. Donna and I really hit it off right away. She worked as a nurse and seemed very down to earth and kind. When she asked me out for a drink, I decided to take a cautious leap of faith. We met at a bar near my apartment. I immediately felt at ease in Donna's presence. She had an infectious laugh and fun sense of humor. Over beers, we discovered we shared a love of hiking and 80s music. After the bar, Donna invited me for a nightcap at her place. Though initially hesitant given my past experience, I went with my gut instinct that she was trustworthy. Her small but cozy apartment reflected Donna's warm personality. We opened a bottle of wine and settled on the couch to continue chatting. I didn't feel pressured or uncomfortable, just intrigued getting to know this interesting, genuine woman. Out of the blue, Donna mentioned she was saving up to start her own organic farm. She shyly asked if I would consider investing in her dream. She had a solid business plan and just needed startup capital. My heart sank, immediately transported back to that traumatic first date with Tasha. I froze up, unsure how to respond. Sensing my hesitation, Donna gently reassured me that if I wasn't interested, no hard feelings. Her gracious reaction couldn't have contrasted more starkly with Tasha's aggression. I explained about my previous bad experience. Donna expressed empathy and apologized for bringing up investments so soon. That moment removed any lingering doubts about Donna's good intentions. Unlike Tasha, Donna didn't pressure or manipulate me. I realized I could trust my instincts with her. Though I declined investing, we continued our evening, getting to know one another, developing a true connection. In the months since, Donna and I have grown quite close. Our relationship developed organically without pressure or pretense. For once, I feel secure, not constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop. My horror date with Tasha left emotional scars, making me distrustful. But meeting Donna restored my faith that genuine people exist. Her kindness and understanding helped me become open to love again. I'm grateful for this second chance to build a healthy bond based on mutual care and respect. Though wary at first, I took a risk and followed my heart. Donna proved looks and charm alone don't determine character. Now I realize it's worth getting to know someone's true nature before making judgments. With caution and wisdom, even past hurts can guide us toward greater fulfillment. My eyes are open, but the possibilities feel boundless. It was supposed to be just a simple first date. We had met online a few weeks ago and hit it off right away. He seemed totally normal at first, cute, charming, interested in the same hobbies as me. When he asked me out to dinner, I gladly accepted. I spent an hour getting ready, eager for what I hoped would be a fun night out. When I arrived at the restaurant, he was already there waiting. I smiled as he pulled out my chair, and the conversation flowed easily as we looked over our menus. The waiter came to take our order, and that's when things started to feel off. As I told the waiter my selection, I noticed my date watching me intently, his eyes focused and analytical. I shifted in my seat, suddenly self-conscious under his gaze. After the waiter left, the questions started. At first, they seemed innocuous enough. Where did I grow up? What did my parents do? What was my major in college? But as the meal went on, the questions got more and more personal and prying. He wanted to know everything from my political views to my deepest fears, even asking about past trauma and relationships. It felt like he was dissecting every part of my life. I tried to keep up my end of the conversation, asking about his job and interests, but he always steered it back to me, continuing the unrelenting interrogation. The questions kept coming, faster and faster, barely giving me time to answer one before moving to the next. It was like he had a mental checklist that he was determined to complete, no matter how uncomfortable it made me. As dinner ended, I quickly asked for the check, ready to make an exit, but he insisted on walking me to my car, peppering me with even more questions as we left the restaurant. How often do I come to this part of town? Do I feel safe walking alone at night? Have I ever considered getting a gun for protection? His tone was overly concerned, but it only made my skin crawl. We reached my car, and I fumbled to unlock it, eager to be away from his unsettling presence. but suddenly his hand gripped my arm, forcefully turning me to face him. The charming exterior had melted away, revealing something much more ominous behind his eyes. He told me he had a nice time getting to know me, his fingers digging into my arm. I needed to understand, for my own good, that people weren't always what they seemed. Darkness lurked beneath even the most innocent surface. I wrenched my arm from his grasp and scrambled into my car, locks clicking shut just as he reached my window. I sped out of the parking lot, watching him stare after me in the rearview mirror, his figure shrinking but his gaze remaining locked on me until I turned the corner. My hands were shaking as I drove home, replaying the night's events in my mind. He had seemed so nice, so normal at first, but underneath was something disturbing and threatening, though I couldn't put my finger on exactly what. A sick feeling settled in my gut as I realized I had told this ominous stranger things about myself I wouldn't even tell close friends. Who was he, and what did he really want from me? I felt violated and exposed. For weeks after I found myself looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see him turn up somewhere in my life again. I pulled down my online dating profiles, wary of encountering another wolf in sheep's clothing. It was just supposed to be a simple first date, but it had turned into something that left me unsettled and insecure. I reminded myself to always stay alert. You never know what darkness people hide or what their true intentions are. A friendly surface can disguise something much more sinister lurking underneath. It's been months now since that disturbing first date, but I'm still shaken by the experience. My friends tell me I should get back out there, but I just can't bring myself to put an online dating profile back up or say yes when asked out in person. The memory of that man's piercing gaze and intrusive questions haunts me. Part of me worries that I'm letting one bad experience sour my outlook on dating and people in general. I know there must be kind, genuine men out there looking for a real connection, but the nagging doubt remains. How could I ever really know if someone is who they claim to be at first? Are there subtle red flags I will miss until it's too late? For now, I've decided to stop trying to force dating. It doesn't feel right or fun anymore. Instead, it feels like an endless series of first dates with strangers who I have to vet carefully. There's no more carefree excitement of getting to know someone new. Just wariness and analyzing every word and gesture for hints of ulterior motives. I miss the time when I eagerly looked forward to first dates, getting dressed up and letting conversation flow freely. I took for granted feeling safe and relaxed with a virtual stranger across the table. But that innocence is gone now. Once you've been completely exposed by someone you barely know, it's hard to regain that foolish openness. I'm working on rebuilding my sense of trust bit by bit. Maybe someday I'll dip my toe back in the dating pool when it feels right. For today, I'm keeping my circle small and only letting those closest to me into my world. If I ever try online dating again, it certainly won't be for a long while. I'm still unpacking all that happened that night and haven't reached a place of closure yet. My friends say I shouldn't judge all men by one bad experience. In my heart, I know they're probably right, but my head is not ready to open back up and take that emotional risk again. For now, I'm learning to feel whole on my own once more, and trusting that when the time comes and I'm ready to open my heart again, the right person will come along. Someone who earns my trust slowly, who doesn't take advantage of vulnerability. I choose to believe genuine connections are still out there, just not today. And maybe not for a long time, but someday. I was so excited for my first date with Sarah. We had met a few weeks ago at a coffee shop and really hit it off. She seemed sweet, smart, and we had a lot in common. I suggested dinner and a movie for our first official date, and she happily agreed. The day came and I showed up at her apartment around time, a little nervous but mostly thrilled to see her again. She welcomed me in with a bright smile and had offered me a drink while she finished getting ready. I noticed a vase of fresh flowers on the kitchen counter that hadn't been there during my previous visit. I also spotted 2 toothbrushes in the holder in her bathroom. Strange, I thought, but figured she must have recently bought new decor. We headed out to dinner and the conversation flowed easily. Sarah was just as charming as I remembered, and we both had a great time. After dinner, we went to the movie theater nearby. On the way, I noticed a man's hooded sweatshirt draped over a chair in her living room. It seemed odd, but again, I brushed it off. At the theater, I bought our tickets while Sarah used the restroom. When she returned, I caught a glimpse of a text notification on her phone from someone named Brian. Probably just a friend, I told myself. We found our seats and got absorbed in the movie, cozied up with popcorn between us. I kept glancing over at Sarah's beautiful smile, illuminated by the screen. Maybe I was just imagining things earlier. After the movie ended, we walked back to her place hand in hand, talking about our favorite scenes. The whole night had gone perfectly so far. When we got inside, Sarah went to use the restroom again while I waited on the couch. This time, I noticed men's sneakers under the coffee table that I knew didn't belong to her. My heart started racing a little. When she came back, I finally got up the nerve to ask her who Brian was. She looked caught off guard and hesitated before responding. "He's my ex," she admitted, "but it's not what you think." She went on to explain that Brian had lived with her for years and still hadn't fully moved out. He came by sometimes to get mail or extra clothes when he was between places. I felt sick to my stomach. Here I was thinking we were sharing a special first date, when all night there were little clues that someone else was still very much part of her life. I got very quiet as my head spun. How could she not mention she was still living with her ex? Did she really think that was okay? Sarah could tell I was upset. She tried reassuring me that it wasn't serious between them anymore, and she wanted to be with me now. But the damage was already done. I no longer trusted her, and realized I didn't know her at all. I made an excuse that I was tired and had to get home early. She walked me to the door looking anxious, apologizing again and asking if she could make it up to me. I just needed to get out of there. I told her I'd call her, but knew that wasn't true. I felt shattered and foolish as I walked to my car, replaying the entire night in my head. Had there been even more signs I missed? The drive home was a blur. I felt sick with disappointment about how the night had unraveled. I had really starting to fall for Sarah before all this. Now my heart was closed off to her. I realized first dates are always a gamble. Sometimes you think you find an amazing connection, when in reality, you've revealed just a glimpse of that person's complex life. When I got back to my apartment, I saw a new text from Sarah pleading for another chance. She said she should have been more upfront and felt terrible, but I knew this would haunt me forever. I would always wonder if she was still involved with her ex or hiding something else big. I texted her back a simple "no thank you" and left it at that. As much as I wanted our connection to be real, everything in me said to walk away. Who knew what else I would notice if I looked closer? In the end, I was proud I trusted my instincts. Her secretive life with her ex was a bright red flag I couldn't ignore. I was deeply disappointed our romance wouldn't happen, but I knew I deserved genuine honesty and openness in a relationship. For now, I would rather be alone. In the following days, I found myself constantly replaying everything that happened on our date. The more I thought about it, the more warning signs I realized I had missed. Like how she changed the subject when I asked if she lived alone, or got a few mysterious calls during dinner that she didn't answer. I kept wondering if I had been too quick to judge, or if I should give her another chance to explain. Part of me thought maybe I overreacted in the moment. Sarah seemed genuinely remorseful, and perhaps she had valid reasons for not mentioning her living situation sooner. A small part of me held out hope it could still work between us if we talked it through. But the rational side of me knew in my gut I had made the right call. As much as it hurt, I had to listen to those instincts that said something wasn't right. My friends tried consoling me and saying I dodged a bullet. They helped me see that Sarah wasn't the one for me if she was hiding major parts of her life. I knew they had a point, but it still didn't make getting over her any easier. I found myself wistfully checking my phone constantly, hoping she would text so we could talk it over. The sadness and doubt crept up at night, making me question if I had been too harsh. But I kept reminding myself that open communication is essential in a healthy relationship. If Sarah wasn't willing to be upfront from the start, especially about an ex still living with her, that raised too many red flags. As painful as it was, cutting ties was the wise thing to do, no matter how strongly I felt drawn to her at first. Going forward, I promised myself not to ignore those warning signs out of wishful thinking. I would rather be safe than sorry when it came to dating. While the experience left me feeling dejected for a while, it was also an important lesson. It reminded me not to get carried away too quickly and keep a clear head when getting to know someone new. I had to remember that first impressions aren't everything. There is so much beneath the surface you can't see right away. Although it wasn't the romantic evening I had hoped for, I was proud of myself for recognizing the situation for what it was, a major incompatibility issue that would only lead to more hurt down the line. As difficult as it was, walking away with my dignity intact felt empowering. I knew there would be other opportunities to find someone more honest and deserving of my trust someday. For now, I was content keeping my standards high and not settling for anything less than I deserve. Thanks for listening in. If you like these stories and want to hear more, then please subscribe and like and support this new channel. We have more stories for you to listen to.